Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, and our friends, those dog-faced pony soldiers.
There seem to be a lot of them these days. But
Yep.
before we get into the political aspects of things, weather update. That was a pretty big storm that rolled through Maryland last night. I don't know what your side of the river was like.
Ooh, yeah, it was it was big here too. Yeah, it shut down all the like evening sports and stuff on our side of the river, and a lot of trees down. I'm seeing on my thing, this road and that road are blocked or partially blocked, and so forth. So I think you got it a little worse than we did, but that was that thunder. I was watching it, come across on radar, and like the middle, it wasn't a big, long, thick line of storms, but the line, it was like purple. The color of that radar was just awful. So, those are some tough little storms, and it was warm, moist air, the perfect kind to have a good summer thunderstorm.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just. I didn't realize. I kind of watch what happens, right from my area there, and it was heavy and everything like that. Didn't think that whole lot about it. I think we had a brief power surge or whatever, but other than that, it seemed to be okay. And then I get up this morning and I go to the gym, and they have, I guess it's Channel 4, so it's the NBC Washington on there. And so as I'm kind of peeking over there, you're just saying, they're reporting from Olney and all the trees down in Olney. Olney's
Yeah,
not, that's right around the corner from me. It's not
yeah.
that far
Only
away.
got pounded.
Yeah, they
It was
really
bad
got
over there.
they got pounded. College Park got slammed.
Yeah,
DC. I'm looking at these things of like that house in College Park where I guess a tree came down and basically cut it in half or split it in half where some students lived. Power lines came down, which I think was in DC, and set cars on fire or something.
yeah.
This was just insane, in terms of damage. So this goes back to my whole thing too. It's just that. So I've got this tree line in the back that's set from the house, and I'm an old fuddy-duddy, kind of a precautionary kind of guy. It's like when we went house hunting, back in 2004 or thereabouts, the one thing that we tried to rule out was lots of trees. And realtors would look at us and they're like, everybody loves trees, don't you want trees and shade and all this? And my thing was that I've seen too many trees too close to houses. Just as they get older, boom,
Yeah.
all you need is a big storm and it knocks something down a house. And I didn't want that at all. So I keep thinking, it's like, yeah, I'll get branches and a bunch of stuff in the back of my yard, but nothing, yet, coming through there. And I think I'm relatively safe, in general. But yeah, there are people who have those big, they'll have the trees that have been sitting in the front of the yard for a home for 50 years or more or whatever. And one of these, all you need is one of these storms. It's to uproot one of those suckers, and those guys come down and they will take you out. Unbelievable.
Reston started out in the mid to late 60s, right? So a lot of like where I live was built in 1971. So these are things that are now 50, 60 years old. And that's when, a lot of these trees that are not like old growth type of trees, that's when they've kind of had it, and they're subject to being rotted or whatever and falling forward and so forth. So, Reston, they dictate, where every blade of grass can grow, where every tree can survive or whatever. So they manage it, and, they're aggressive about cutting down trees that could fall into people's houses.
Yeah, I think there has been a change in some of the policy around the country with places where they thought the trees, the beautification, almost kind of a Lady Bird Johnson type of
Yeah,
mentality, right? And so they had that to say we've got to find that kind of that right mix of things there, because if you start looking down the road at 40, 50 years, you may have a problem if you're not aggressive in pruning and trimming and watching that. And I'm saying I'm perfectly fine if the county and state governments and stuff like that actually have arborists on
yeah,
staff to do that. People who actually understand what a tree is and all that, and can spot the potential danger signals and take it out before the disaster happens. I mean, I just, I always remember, Connecticut Avenue, Chevy Chase. You've been down that stretch of road, I think, in the past, and it's a canopy,
Yeah.
Of these old trees. And how many years has it been? 10, 15, I don't know how many years ago. I still remember the woman who was driving a van full of kids to or fro some kind of activity, swimming or whatever. And one of those, a branch, huge branch came down from one of those big old trees, came through and killed her. The kids survived, but she died. I mean, and she was a mother of, I think she herself had 4 or 5 kids, and she was young, and it was a tragedy. But these are things that can be managed and should be managed. You got to watch out. It's like, oh, it looks pretty, but there's danger lurking.
Yeah, and especially like the other thing that's happening here in Reston is becoming very densely populated. They're about to, within the next few months, open metro all the way out into Loudoun County. So you have the metro here is becoming really valuable real estate, really packed, dense real estate. So it's interesting to see, they're having to manage that with that in mind now, because it's really, population density here is through the roof. The high school my kids go to has added about 1,000 or 1,100 students of enrollment in the last 4 years. So that's a huge, that's its own high school, right? There's a lot of high schools out there that don't have 1,100 people in them. So they've added that. I mean, it's really packed up there.
So have they had to go to portable classrooms to handle?
They have some portable classrooms, and they use every inch of that school. They meet in the hallways and stuff like that. It's quite a production up there.
Yeah, I can imagine that's something. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, we've seen schools having to go to that portable classroom thing, or they go back to, Montgomery County. I mean, you've been around, you covered sports here for a number of years.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of school closings, and then they've had to go back and, rehab and open up a lot of those old, reuse those buildings because of growth. They had to have some place to put these kids. And, if you already have a building and if you have the structure and you just have to make sure it's up to snuff code and everything like that, then you do it. But yeah, it's just, it's crazy. I mean, I think even, when they built that new Blair High School, which was huge compared to the old Blair, it still it hit capacity really, really quickly.
Yeah. So, now you have Blake at capacity, and you have, they've reopened Northwood.
Right.
They've opened a school up near Damascus somewhere. What's it called? Clarksburg.
They have a Clarksburg High up there, right? And I mean, and they built Northwest to help the overcrowding at Seneca.
Yeah,
right?
Seneca's. I think there's 5 schools that opened and took kids from Seneca.
Yeah,
the football coaches can name them.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there was a huge football dynasty going on over there. And next thing you know is that these guys, this school, schools start popping up there, and you start losing some of your key guys.
In the decade of the 1990s, this school was 110 and 12. And won 6 state championships, won the last 39 games of the decade. So that's a run there. That is,
Yeah, and I really didn't. I mean, that looked like it was going to continue for a long time, and then the other schools started to come into play, and so now the
coaching changes and
they got dispersed and a lot of them. You can't maintain that forever, in sports, but it's it's quite a feat.
It was incredible while it lasted.
Yeah, Montgomery County, they had a lot of good coaches over the years in football.
I will say this: of all the places I've covered sports, there's many good coaches. The coaching in Montgomery County is as good as it is anywhere. Playing quality, like public school football there, doesn't really measure up to public school in Virginia or the private schools. Still, a lot of the kids there a lot more than they do other places, but the coaching, the quality of the coaching is really good in Montgomery. Some of the best coaches I ever covered were in Montgomery.
Yeah, I mean that's always what made it fun growing up here, just watching high school sports, because you could see the coaching and such great coaches that we had all throughout the county.
I know your kids went to Magruder, right?
So yeah, they went to, so my oldest actually finished through Kennedy before we moved.
Oh,
the year
okay.
removed. And then the other two, well, then Spencer started at Kennedy, finished at Magruder, and then Stephen went Magruder all the way.
The Magruder basketball coach is the single best coach I've ever covered in any sport. Dan Harwood, really good.
Kind of makes up for the lack of success on the gridiron.
That's right. That's right.
Parents still support him, but it's not easy.
Nope.
All right. Enough of local stuff anyway. It was good catching up with that. All right. So we got the inflation number this morning, probably a little bit higher than the analysts wanted, 9.1%. Core was still, I think, at 5.9%. I think you and I both agree that that's still not even really close to numbers we see a lot of times in, for our own purchasing habits. It's
right.
far higher than that. But it's, once again, they're still at these 40-year highs. And you have mentioned before, things like this, when they're by this time of the year, they're kind of baked in here for the election. This is just not good news. So I was looking around this morning before that number came out, because I just happened to see, and I don't know if you saw this on, for the Post, but Perry Bacon Jr., no conservative,
Right.
his column was, is the problem, the Democrats' problem Biden or inflation? And he interviewed a bunch of pollsters and stuff like that. And it was somewhat inconclusive as to, inflation plays a part of it, but there's no doubt that Biden, has a role to play in this too. The Democrats, they're just in big trouble in November. These numbers are just not good. And the administration doesn't seem to have a clue as to how to get a handle of this.
Right. So a few things on that. For one, 9.1, the price of energy over the year over year is up 42%. So that's one. It's like you can't get away from that. And I guess my answer to Perry Bacon would be yes. Biden and inflation are the problems, right? But inflation presents a challenge. Terrible inflation got Ronald Reagan reelected, right? Didn't get him elected the first time. Got him elected the first time because, it didn't look like Carter, like Biden, didn't seem to have a approach to do anything about it. And it got him elected the second time because his did work. You could see that, one was better than the other. It's interesting, we're getting to this point where, Republicans are starting to think about who their nominee will be in 2024. And, it would seem to be simple for Trump to get up there and say, do the old Reagan thing. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And it'd be hard for anyone to argue that they are, right? So, but it now looks like, Republicans may go another way. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. How it should be Trump who benefits from this politically, but because of other things, it may not be. It may be someone who comes along and says, I'll do roughly what he was doing, right, to fix the economy. We'll unleash energy and we'll deal with inflation that way, get the price of energy down, which has come down a few pennies, right? 15 or 20% because demand collapsed and has stayed collapsed. And so this is the time of year when their demand should be highest, right? People are traveling, and people who normally only drive locally are now adding beach trips and camping trips and things like that to their driving schedule. But it's not happening. Demand is lower this month than it was last month, and it's lower last month than it was the month before. So, Americans' response to this inflation has been to reduce spending, which, in the short term is bad for Biden.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think what was the average price of gas station? Is it down to like $4.65 or something like that, or whatever?
I saw something in the 480s, but
maybe it's 480 something. Yeah, maybe it's 40 something. Maybe so. Anyway, but it's down at least 20 cents or something like that, or more.
Yeah, and it's come down like 26 or 7 days in a row now. So
yeah. But as you pointed out, this is not anything that Biden did. In this particular case, this is demand collapsing. July is a very heavy demand month normally, but people are changing their habits. They're looking at different ways of doing things, whether or not it's just cutting back on taking trips, canceling road trips. People who've got
opposing suffering. That's not a political winner. Yeah, I don't know if you saw this. Nate Silver out in the last day or so saying the Republicans should win the Senate now. I think he has it 56-44 that Republicans will win the Senate. He has it 88-12 that the Republicans will win the House, will take over the House. So
Yeah, well,
it's looking like Republican control after New Year's.
Yeah, that would be good news, because I still get a little bit jittery about the Senate. I mean, Herschel Walker's explanation on climate, a little bit, I don't know.
Herschel Walker's explanation on family, he seems to have forgotten some of his kids.
Yeah, that, and you get a little bit worried about some of that stuff, but a good strong.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you something though. I will say this about that. Yeah, it's possible that there's a better candidate within the state of Georgia for that thing, but he's the one who won, and a Republican, or someone who comes in and votes for Republican leadership, votes as Republicans want him to vote for on the legislation that comes down the line, would be better than a Democrat, sight unseen, under any circumstances. And it is not like Reverend Warnock has done anything to distinguish himself in the Senate.
Exactly.
So, I don't think that they lose anything, in quality of senatorial representation by voting for Walker, and you definitely get on the right side of history. You just can't keep voting for what these people are voting for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're exactly right, though. I mean, Warnock has done nothing at all
to earn another shot. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's kind of, I guess it's kind of like Alabama and Doug Jones or something like that, right? I mean,
right. And he won, and then Tuberville won because he won, right?
Yeah.
Because it just took somebody with an R by their name, and football coach with a bus on fire beat you.
Yeah.
So, and I'm for that happening here. I think it's very important that we get Congress under control of Republicans, after the next few election cycles, because the other side's crazy. I mean, they have lost it.
Yeah, well, they're showing that particularly. I mean, we're still seeing that. I mean, the whole Roe v. Wade thing still is resonating. I mean, it still bothers the Democrats, the progressive left, to no end, and they cannot separate themselves from that issue, and so we're really seeing the top line crazy at this point because of that. There's just lots of streaming and all kinds of things that are going on with these guys, and so it's just we're seeing, and that's an issue that's really not going to sway the general electorate.
Right.
I love this.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so yep. I mean, Walker's got a great sports history resume, right, and everything like that. So there is something to that. And there are people who will kind of vote on that celebrity kind of thing like that, especially when you have just a guy like Warnock who hasn't really come out and been a standout in the time he's been in. So the opportunity is there. So hopefully Walker can get through all of that. We'll have to wait to be seen. But the more these numbers, these types of things going on here, all the things that continue to plague the Biden administration come in there, it negates Biden's ability to go out there and really stump for a widespread number of candidates. I mean, he's wholly unpopular. People don't really want to see him. He's not going to be a positive force for the Democrats. He's a negative force for the Democrats. So you put him on the sidelines, and then you're running, without that aid. Democrats are going to face a tough road. I mean, there's just no doubt.
And after 2022, I mean, he wants to run again, right? And he can't really at this point say he's not going to run again, right? So or else he's a complete lame duck, especially Republicans take Congress, right? He's got to try to keep running. And, I guess yesterday, 2/3 of them said in a poll said they did not want him to run again. Someone asked him about this at an event, and he broke out of what he was doing, ran over and got in the guy's face and said, look at the polls, Jack. And he said that 92% of his voters said they would vote for him again. That sounds like a big deal, but that's actually, that's not a good amount, right? I think 99% of the people who voted for Trump would have voted for him again, right?
Well, I mean,
92 is a low number on that scale.
Well, the problem with that, so I think that it was 64% in the New York Times poll that said They don't want him to run again in 2024. And you're right. The thing is that you cannot say in 2022 that you're not going to run in 2024, because that totally kills you. I mean, everything's dead at that point.
Right.
So you've got to continue to go on, whether or not you have control of the Senate or the House or not. You have to continue to soldier on for at least another year or so, or get close to that time period where you could allow, where you still allow a reasonable amount of time for them to select somebody else to take over for you, come 2024 and run. But
and if I'm him, I wait to see some votes come in saying that they don't want me. I don't take it from polling.
But but as I understand, I mean, besides the fact that he got really testy with that, right? I mean, that whole thing. The other thing about it was that he took that really from his press secretary, right, Karine Jean-Pierre, who had not actually used the figure correctly in context, because the 92% figure, as I understand, was 92% of the people would vote for Biden if he ran against Trump in 2024. That was the context. It's not that 92% of the people support him. Okay, that it's a completely different kind of a thing. So they've taken that out of context, and they're perpetrating really a lie in this sense, because that's really not the figures. I mean, when you've got they don't want to talk about, what was it, 33% approval rating. The disapproval ratings are going through the roof. Independents are banning him. I mean, they have got just loads and loads of problems, and both Karine Jean-Pierre and Biden are like, pay attention, read those polls, right? It's like, yeah, we're reading the polls. You're not reading the polls.
Good for you. You're not reading them. We are reading them. And the thing is,
even the media seems to be reading them. Hello, Joe.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other thing that's happening here is the media has decided that being on the right side of history means getting off his bandwagon, right?
Yeah,
they've had, they're running. They're like, oh, is he too old? Are we pressing the limits of the age of a president and everything? He's got a lot of like those all of a sudden out of the woodwork stories of, is he too old? Are they dysfunctional? Who's the breakdown? What's the problem in the White House type of thing? And, so it's, and it's like, they have some really, I don't know if you saw this, they've gotten rid of Kate Bedingfield, who was the communications director, but she's still there, right? She's like one of those, I guess she's like Boris Johnson. She's the caretaker until they hire the new one. And so she put out the administration's reaction to the Dobbs decision. And she's like, she had some line in there about, activists who have no idea how to win elections, keep pressing us to do this and that and the other. And like the activists, they're your allies. They're like, what are you talking about? I mean, we're the only ones left in the bunker with you, and we're leaving. So, they're having a lot of problems with their own supporters, right? The only thing that really unites the left right now is hatred of Trump. And so the whole of this J6 committee, I'm trying to understand about this. And maybe somebody will write in and see us and set me straight on this. But this hearing yesterday, I kept getting these breathless updates, right? Boy, it has been now revealed that Trump told the people to go to the Capitol. He said that in his speech. We knew that from the get-go, right? That he said, yes, we're going to march down to the Capitol peacefully. Okay, so what was the reveal there? And then there was some guy from Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or one of these people. He's like, well, we took him saying, he tweeted out there will be a rally on January 6th. It'll be wild, as meaning to get violent. And it's like, are you kidding me? That's your evidence, that Trump stirred people to violence. I mean, that's, that's nuts. That's frankly nuts. And so when you look at what they're doing, right, this is a show trial. There's no challenge to any of the witnesses. It's just, they're being led by the questioning to the conclusions that Democrats want them to have and so forth. And I think it's getting to the point where Americans have decided they don't really have anything actionable against Trump, but maybe we should think about another direction, which is the whole aim of the thing is to sully Trump beyond the point where he can run in 2024. So, he has a decision to make. The polling's there's a mixed bag of polling on how viable he would be. He appears to be right now in most polls, he would be the number one vote getter among Republicans in a primary. He would beat, I guess, Ron DeSantis to second, even though we're not certain that he will even run for president in 2024. But he's a distant second. He's 25 or 30 points behind. So I don't know. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we have that, we have a situation here where, we could have a matchup that no one wants. We could have a rematch of Biden and Trump.
Yeah. I mean, that's always possible. I mean, I've made no bones about it. I mean, my preference is that Trump is just off to the side. I mean, I'd like to have him. He can have a positive impact with candidates and help get a lot of Republicans elected. I don't really want him as the candidate. I mean, if he winds up being the nominee, then so be it. I'll do my duty and vote for him and whatnot. But I'd rather go in a different direction, just because he is such a lightning rod for the left. He rallies the left so much. So, I mean, the Democrats, part of their thing, I mean, as you're talking, really is just that, if they continue, I mean, part of the reason that there's this J6 hearing is that they want to continue to bring Trump down and make him front and center and keep him in the minds of the voters as to why you need to have Democrats in office. But from anything substantial out of the J6 hearings, really nothing. I mean, because there's no cross-examination. It's a one-sided deal, and all of this type of stuff. I mean,
it's very much cherry picked, and there's credibility problems with some of the witnesses and so forth. But the thing about it is like there's a danger, though. I hear what you're saying, and you're not the only person saying it for sure. But there's a danger in letting them pick your candidates, right? And that's kind of what this looks and feels like. If we say, okay, well, if they're so mad about Trump, we'll move on to Plan B, right? It's like you get one vote in theory. And they're not sure what happened in 2020, but in theory, you get one vote. And so however angry you are, it doesn't really matter. You vote your one time for the other guy or whatever and move on. And if it's Biden, I don't see how they survive that. I don't see how you say, his support among independents is in the mid-teens. All right. So everybody who's persuadable is out of his camp now. When you're polling in the 30s, right, your base gives you 40. Just everybody who's never going to vote for Republican as long as they live basically gives you 40, right? And now he's at 35 and 37 and some of these things even lower. So that means he's lost base, right? And so what base is he losing? Is he losing radical leftists, people to the left of him who are saying, he hasn't done enough about this and that and the other? Or is he losing the middle, the people who are who could be persuaded, who could go the other way, who, what we think of traditional mainline Democrats? And how many of those are there left? They talk about how our party has become radicalized. Where are the moderate Democrats? Who's a moderate Democrat? You have Elizabeth Warren out there saying every crisis pregnancy center in the country should be shut down, and so the women would be forced to have abortions. I mean, that's, and I guess you saw this woman who was arguing with Senator Hawley yesterday about whether men can get pregnant. I mean, you can't be on the side of arguing men can get pregnant, right? They can't get pregnant. They can't. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's so crazy out there with all of this. Yeah, you can look at what's happening in Maryland. I mean, there's a DGA PAC that has put out a flyer basically to try to promote Dan Cox for governor, okay, as a way, because if Kelly Schultz wins the nomination here, with the primary, I mean, we're already in early voting in Maryland, then it becomes a much tougher road for the Democrats to win, just because Kelly is a lot like Larry Hogan. But I've got my ardent right wing friends that are big Cox supporters, but Cox has got, he is a super Trumper. And so that attracts a certain segment of the Maryland Republican, vote, but it also turns off a lot of people too. This race has become one of they keep calling Kelly, Schultz a rhino. It's like, look, I know she's a middle of the road Republican. Okay, I know what I'm getting with Kelly Schultz. Okay, she's been in the Hogan administration. She's been in the state legislature. Fine. Has she? I don't know that she's distinguished herself beyond it, but I mean, Hogan kind of came from nowhere and won. just by understanding that in order to win as a Republican in Maryland, you have to be somewhere in the center. You cannot be Dan Cox to the right and win statewide in Maryland. You can win the Eastern Shore, but you cannot win Montgomery County, PG County, places like that where there's huge swaths of votes. So you have to do this nevertheless. But we thought it was funny, and then I think Cox put out a mailer attacking Schultz, but he misspelled her name, and stuff like that. It's one of those things. It's like I'm crossing my fingers that the primary goes for Kelly, because it would be an absolute disaster in my mind if Dan Cox won the nomination. But who knows? And I think in the end, does Trump have a shot at winning the nomination 2024? Absolutely, he's got strong support. But if I had a choice in Maryland, or something like that, I'd be looking to DeSantis or someone else. I want to change. I'm going to choose my candidate, but I just because I love Trump's policies in general, just that his behavior was too erratic for me. And I think it just becomes too much of a lightning rod and distracts from a lot of other things. I want the Trump policies, maybe just in a different person or something. I don't know.
Well, but see, here's the thing, though, is like, you don't really get the Trump policies with the different people. And
right, that's the problem.
It'll take them 10 minutes to sub the word DeSantis everywhere they put Trump on all their, he's a Nazi, he's a this, he's a that, right? They're going to attack whoever it is.
Yeah.
What about pro-choice? That's really lunacy. He's really right. Why would you be against someone not getting an abortion? Right. I mean, they're not confusing people. People understand the difference between getting an abortion and not getting an abortion. And when they go to a crisis pregnancy center, it's because they are considering options other than abortion, right? They want to go talk about it. They don't want to just go straight on the table. So, what's wrong with that? Why is that bad? Why does it, let's make sure all babies are killed first, and no other way out of it. It's just ridiculous.
All right. I got some support here. All right.
Yeah.
See, they're too sensitive.
I don't know. I don't really know where I am. We don't have to decide yet.
Right.
I have not decided yet.
Look, in the end, there's still a lot of time. We don't even know what that field will look like. As you said, DeSantis may not run. We don't know.
Right.
You
may get to listening to people like Mike Pompeo and decide that DeSantis is not
sure. I need to hear a lot more. And then there was that story that more people are saying that Hogan was saying more people are telling him he should run in 2024, and I'm like, shoot me now, then, okay?
No, Larry. That's what there's not. Okay, that's the thing about the primary process. One of the things we're going to find out is the Bush Cheney wing of the party is dead. No, there's not enough people to fill up a phone booth who want that kind of candidate again. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, right? It's like do not. Look, I want Larry Hogan as a senator from Maryland because he's a good fit there, and we need to do something in Maryland for that. He's a better fit there. Obviously, I'd rather have a Larry Hogan.
He's Susan Collins in a shirt.
Well, yeah, but it's still better than who Maryland's got.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing.
That's right.
Incremental improvement, is still, and he still be an R vote most of the time on things that we would want him to be. Right.
The most important thing in the Senate is the first vote you take, the vote to organize the Senate.
Right.
Once that one's over, we can get past most of your other mistakes.
Yeah. So, I would prefer that he do there because I think he stands a much better chance to do that than anything presidential because, as you said, that Bush type of party, you can't run and win nationally like that. It's not going to happen. Right. I think that people are tired of that. So as a result of that, it's going to be the DeSantis's, the Ted Cruz's, whatever, that group out there that's going to run, like you said, Pompeo, all these guys. It'll be interesting to see, what happens going down there. All right. One more thing on Biden. I do want to talk about, you mentioned Boris. I do want to talk about Boris because we've got to talk about Boris. And that's just Jill Biden not helping the situation with her taco remarks. She has apologized for comparing comparing these people, the Latinos, to tacos, uh, you know, and all that stuff.
We're
But
not
I mean,
tacos.
yeah, I mean, the reaction was very swift and very severe from the Latin journalists and others about this. Whoever wrote that was a complete dunce and an idiot, and they're already losing support with the Hispanic community as it is, right? They're
Hemorrhaging. They're in huge trouble
they
with
are,
Hispanic.
and this is not going to help. I mean, I don't know if you did you see that the RNC made a taco T-shirt?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I saw the one with her
yeah,
dress, her taco dress.
yeah. It's just yeah, and it just I actually a friend of mine, this extreme right wing guy, Alirio Martinez. I mean, he was posting on his Facebook, right? So he's a Dan Cox guy, which is fine, but he's like, I'm not a taco, I'm a pupusa.
That's right.
So it's just. I mean, she opened it up to so many things. What a disaster. I mean, things are
Right.
just.
And again, what do they really look out of that? Because I mean, you don't look at her and say, "Oh, she hates Hispanic people," right? That's not what got communicated there. What got communicated there is that they're inept. They have no idea what they're doing, and that's like that runs through everything they do. Is these guys are completely incompetent.
Yeah, I mean, okay, look. Everybody knows the word is bodega, and she runs through them and goes bogadas. I was like, come on, okay. It's like I thought you were better than Joe on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing is like, I guess she's not. I guess she didn't realize it, because that's the words on a she's reading a teleprompter.
Yeah, and she
and I think she stuck faithfully to it too. So
yeah,
which is awesome.
no, I mean, it's just then walk that back. I mean, it was just a disaster. And Jill is the one that we kind of expected, or at least I think the administration was thinking like, Joe is the gaffe machine. You can't stop him from committing gaffes because he does this all the time. But Jill's supposed to be this very educated, really straight on. She doesn't make those kind of mistakes. And this was a complete dumpster fire.
The whole thing was, we watched the whole speech. It was horrible. It's a complete, like, I'm here pretending to like Hispanics today. We're nice people. We love your food. It's like the whole thing was fingernails on the blackboard. So
yeah, I mean,
maybe they need to think about where they deploy her.
You never want to look like you're pandering, but she just totally she was totally pandering and just stuck all over it. So it's going to be very hard for the minister. I mean, the apology is one thing, but the damage has been done, and this is just yet another point on there that of just what a failure this administration is. And once again, I think you're going to get more of that voter remorse. I mean, even the Latinos, the Hispanics who voted for for Biden are like, you got to be kidding me. It's like, how do you do this? How does a Democrat do this? With the first lady, unbelievably bad. All right, I'm going to switch gears real quick to Boris.
Okay.
I mean, Boris Johnson. I mean, he's, as you mentioned earlier, he's sticking around while they kind of go through their procedure. As I understand it, I mean, they have to actually they're going to do a mail type of. They have to go through and figure out who the candidates will be to replace him in the party, and then they got to go through this mail ballot procedure, and then get down to like 2 or whatever. So I think it's at least September sometime before they'll have an idea of who the actual candidates will be, and then I guess maybe by October we'll have a new prime minister, leader of the party, and everything like that. But Boris's tenure, I mean, his collapse just became very swift and very severe. Just couldn't seem to get out of the way. And I think the Wall Street Journal, had some good points to make, which was just that here was a guy who tried to portray that he was this really conservative Tory guy, but he did govern a lot from the left. He gave in to a lot of the climate activists and stuff like that, which I know when I saw some of the things he was doing, I'm like, what is he doing? Was this his way of like thinking that that's how he's going to stay in power, which in the end obviously didn't work for him.
Yeah, well, he does go down in history as the guy who got him out of Brexit, so out of the EU, which is going to be one of the most productive and smart things that anybody's done in the UK in many, many years, because the currency, I guess, is now rivals the dollar. I mean, it was a year and a half ago, it was more than $2, right, for a euro, and now it's the same. They're the same today, right? Open to $1.
Yeah.
So, so they have a massive problem to deal with there. But I think that the key to what's about to happen now is to keep the Remainers out of being able to advance a candidate. The Labor wants to get a snap election, get back in charge, which the current polling shows that they would. Labor would win if they voted now and get right back in the EU, which I think would be extremely destructive. And the rest of the countries are going to really humiliate them if they let them back in. It's going to be at a huge and unnecessary price.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the problem right now with exiting the EU is just that with when the pandemic hit, and we've now, everybody worldwide is being hit with these, supply chain issues and product shortages, and the Great Britain is having the same inflationary problems as we are, and so it had those factor into a politician's standing, and Boris couldn't figure out how to manage all of that. The next leader has got to be firm and stand firm on all of these things. Will Brexit work out in the long run? I generally think it will. But I mean, it did, as in its infancy, it got hit with a lot of things that, nobody saw coming. And so it's kind of distorted the picture as to whether or not leaving the EU was a good thing, because it gave strength to the Remainers, to people who oppose, other people who oppose Brexit, to say, look, it failed. And I don't think it's a fair assessment yet. We've had so many issues come out that has clouded the situation. It hasn't had a real chance to go through the process. If these other factors hadn't been out there, I think it would have, we could have seen how it would have worked. It probably would have worked better. But I just don't see why Great Britain wanted to be, why they should be tied to the EU and to all these things. They should be able to control their own destiny. I mean, there are going to be issues, having been in the EU as long as they were, create some things, there's some painful separations, but you can fix that in time.
Yeah. And the thing is to fix it. It's not to surrender to it, right? Just fix it. Just make it work.
Yeah. And Boris, I mean, he had a lot of Trump-like qualities. He was a very mercurial guy and all this stuff like this, but he was very entertaining. I will say that. I mean, it's,
I'm still not sure what got him kicked out. Right. I guess he had some parties or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, right. Well, I mean, it was that it's a snowball effect, because you and I think both know that, in Great Britain, it doesn't take a lot to topple someone in general, because the media plays such a huge role. I mean, they play this stuff up out the wazoo. They love gossip. They love scandal, and they'll blow that up out of proportion a gazillion times.
Yeah. And I will say this, well, on that point, we have a president right now who's really struggling, who's really not doing well on any front, right? But I'm glad that we don't have a country where we can change him out, right? You have to, if you're dealing with us, you're going to have to deal with his administration and his rules, his way of doing things for 4 years. We don't have any snap elections. We don't just keep changing these things out like, Shinzo Abe in Japan, right? He was the longest serving prime minister. It was served like 11 years or something like that, on and off. Okay. Yeah. They had, before he got in there, in a 20-year period, they had 14 prime ministers. One lasted 64 days. Right. So, I mean, how do you move forward with that? Well, you have 14 leaders in 20 years, right? Because parliamentary system, one little slip up and they can take you out. Right. So, I mean, it shows the beauty of the American system.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when you're running a government, you need that assurance that you're going to be in there for a certain period, that time period, so you can put the policies in place and see if they're going to work. And you will then be judged whether or not on your success or failure of what you did there. But to me, as interesting as the parliamentary system is, it is like you're always looking over your shoulder, because you just don't know, how long you really, really have. I mean, look at Israel. I mean, Israel.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say. So the other side of that coin is, the other good thing about not being a parliament. The other thing we people criticize is, we have a two-party system, right? It's only two parties. You got to get one of those parties to have any real chance of success. The others are allowed, and they exist, but only two have a chance to do anything significant in elections, right? So, people say that's bad, but if you look at Israel, you have the far right and the far left attempting to make a governing coalition, right? That's not, what do they agree on that they can govern with? How can that, how does that work? How do we get anything out of that? So, I don't know. I think that those guys, and I don't know if you saw the graphics that came out around the 4th of July, talking about how young they all were. All the founders, were 18, 22, 21. This Jefferson was in his 30s. All the rest of them were low 20s or high teens, our founding fathers. And like the genius that flowed through there, people talk about, is there a God, and are we a godly country? God definitely blessed that operation, right? Because we came out with some incredible wisdom, sustainable political framework out of it that never been tried before.
Yeah.
It's really incredible.
I'm all for open and free elections and having these competing things, but and we've had third parties try, and to look, Ross Perot, went into, he tried and got, gathered up a pretty significant amount of votes, and things like that, and that's fine. But you look at all these countries that have these parliamentary systems. Israel, their last government collapsed because it was a coalition government made up of too many coalitions. You can't govern with that.
Far right and far left. How do they govern together?
And a bunch of other stuff in the middle. And how do you govern? Great Britain has run through that too. And they've had coalition governments. And so then you really can't get through policies because you're then trying to bring along this other set that doesn't really agree with you on much of anything, and you try to get things over the finish line. It doesn't work well, and all this stuff. But I love what you just said about the founding fathers, because I think you have to make at least one comment here about Mazie Hirono and her comments about the founding fathers. It's like, we don't know. Is she
the one that said we shouldn't be capitalizing it anymore?
Well, we don't know what they were thinking. Why are we trying to follow what they said? We don't really know what the founding fathers were thinking. So why are we following the Constitution in essence?
What? Here's the thing about it. She has a law degree, right? She went to Georgetown Law School.
So, yeah.
So how does that happen? How did she get a law degree? Because she's barely coherent. It's not a matter of like political disagreement with her, right? She doesn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, I don't understand these Democrats. It just seems that there's even more crazy than there was before. I don't even know how. You mentioned Elizabeth Warren and her nutty statement on the crisis pregnancy centers and stuff like this. It's like, there are a lot of them that are mad. A lot of this, once again, comes back to Roe v. Wade. It comes back to the makeup of the Supreme Court. There's a ton of talk out there by Ilhan Omar and a bunch of others about packing the Supreme Court and all of these things. And
AOC says abolish it.
Yeah,
she wants to abolish the Supreme Court. Abolish the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that makes a whole
Joe Biden would say, repeat line.
It's just, I don't even know how the left, how the Democrats function anymore with these people, with all this stuff. None of this to me is helpful for November for them, right?
No.
They do these things, and Republicans can easily point to the things they say and stuff like that. But it is going to be an interesting question, going forward, because Republicans, something to think about is that, so for almost the last 50 years, ever since really Roe v. Wade, one of the things about Republicans have done, in trying to push for getting more Republicans elected to the Senate, or getting a Republican president in office, when Democrats have been in office, is think about the Supreme Court, think about Roe v. Wade possibility. We've been going through this. Well, now Roe v. Wade has been overturned. What in your mind? what becomes a bigger the next selling point for that? I mean, the Republicans have a lot of them have used that for years as one of the main selling points as to why we have to have the Donald Trumps or whatever. What's another thing is to prevent the
Well,
Democrats
I'll
from
tell you
coming
what,
back.
like, the big three to me were all hit in the last 2 weeks of the term this year. The Dobbs, the New York gun decision, and West Virginia v. EPA, right? So Dobbs took down the right to an abortion. The New York gun law said shall issue, right? You apply for a permit, they shall issue to. They can't make up a bunch of nonsense criteria. Another thing that's happening is, that brings up is, the defiance that's emerging from the left now. New York, what did New York do? They went out and passed a law that is not, that seems to just fly directly in the face of those of that decision, right? They're just, hey, we're just not going to do that. We're going to do something completely different, completely, opposite of what that thing says. So, I don't know what they hope to achieve by that, but they had a real problem there. You cannot just go around passing laws that the Supreme Court just told you not to. And, finally, West Virginia v. EPA, which says, Congress is going to have to, if they don't put stuff in the law, the agency can't just make up the law for them, right? So, a lot of things are going to have to get voted on, and they're going to get, it's like, during COVID, I don't know if you remember the debates between Fauci and Rand Paul, right? And Fauci would say, these are health concerns. You're talking about freedom. Well, this is not a freedom issue. This is a health issue, right? And Rand Paul is just aghast, and he should be, right? Because, public health official, all he thinks about is public health. He doesn't think about, balancing that against what it does to people's lives and their economy and so forth. It's all just prevent a disease, right? So, they don't balance these things. Voters have to balance these things, right? And so what Democrats are saying basically is don't balance anything. Just keep, pedal to the metal.
All right, we're running toward the end of the program, so let's wrap it up with a last word.
So a couple of things on here that we did not get to. One of them is, Elon Musk said he was not going to buy Twitter because they refused to tell him how many bots were accounts. And so Twitter is now suing him. So there will be discovery, at which point Twitter has to tell him how many bots there really are. So I think he wins on that and probably gets Twitter at a lower price. Everybody thinks the deal's off. I think he is renegotiating for better terms.
Yeah, look, I mean, so my opinion about Musk and Twitter from the beginning was that I really don't think he was really serious about doing this. Musk is almost a master showman. He's great at also distracting people from one thing or another. If there's something happening that might not be good for Tesla or one of his other operations, find something to kind of get the conversation going in a different direction. He chose the price not because it was any like significant valuation, but it had to do with marijuana, 420. So he chose 54.20, just being the Elon Musk being Elon Musk. So
right.
I did think to a certain degree, I thought maybe, he was going to do almost a pump and dump in a sense of where he'd get people interested enough that they would run up the price since he did not report his purchases on time. And then try to get out at a profit, but he stuck around. There's $1 billion breakup fee, which I guess he'd be willing to pay no matter what. Anyway, Twitter's going to push on the price. There's a lot of dispute about the whole bots thing. So everybody knows that social media, there's going to be bots, particularly with something like Twitter. Twitter's given him their fire hose of data. They've given him everything, and he waived due diligence. So so he loses some defense on his side with that, but. There was that other, study that said, there's, like 20% or whatever it was, though there's a lot of different ways to classify it and things like that. I mean, I think Musk, standing on the whole bot thing is a little disingenuous because he's a huge user of Twitter. He knows that there's a lot of bots out there. This is a constant problem for Twitter, has been, though I think Twitter has probably done a better job in the last several years than initially they were.
Well, I mean, they weaponize the bots, though. His concern is real. That's part of how they crush free speech.
I mean, the bots are a problem, but he, it's not like he went into this thinking like it was going to be just some minimal number. There's a lot of PR and a lot of Elon Musk going on in here. It's Musk being Musk. How this ever turns out, well, if he wins or loses, I don't know. I don't know that I really care. In the meantime, I mean, if he does buy it, he is going to have to get a lower price for it, because this purchase, the whole idea of everything like this, has kind of put Twitter in a standstill. He's kind of actually hurt the business model, so they're actually not worth.
We made
what
them
they
think
were.
a little more about the keeping people off too, censorship.
Yeah. So I mean,
he has pegged them as censors, and they're now in the process of kind of trying to defend it. So the other thing is, congratulations to the Shreveport Mavericks, who won the basketball league. They defeated the Albany Patroons last week to win the title in Albany. So
good for them. But
minor league pro basketball.
I hear it's pretty hot in Shreveport these days.
Yeah, it is pretty warm down there. I got out when I could.
All right, that's good enough, I think, for the final words. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. God bless America, and we will see you again. Brian and I will have to discuss the schedule, because I've got a crazy schedule coming up, but you'll see us when you see us. All right, everyone, have a great day. We'll see you around.